Hi everyone, delonewolf here and welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online. The war is actually happening. I'm a little bit surprised by that, but it's really cool to see that there's some action during this summer in EVE Online. Quite a few people coming back, keep stars being anchored in enemy territory. Lots of super fleets being deployed as well, so it's been pretty amazing to watch from afar. I don't go to these fights at this point. These are massive tie-dye fights that do take an enormous amount of time. Can be quite frustrating, especially for people that then need to cycle their guns and things like that. But it is of course quite impressive to see 4,000 players in a single system duke it out over a deployment from a keep star. So definitely really cool, just, you know, not always the best experience in EVE Online. Still, all of that action and all of that destruction should have an impact on the economy, and that's why we're here, of course. Let's go take a look at the market. We are going to start with plex. Oh, and I should maybe first talk a bit about the change that you're seeing here. Advanced moon materials. So I got a mail from a viewer of EVE Talk, and I think he has a really good suggestion. With minerals the way they are now, the Tech 1 ships category is basically very boring. You can only say that these are out of the meta, low market, low price so many times. So he suggested that I take advanced moon materials instead of Tech 1 ships. It's another base material, so it really falls in line with minerals, PI, and then advanced moon materials, which then goes into ships that might actually be somewhat interesting for trading, Tech 2 and Tech 3 ships. Might at some point add just faction ships to that one. I'll see how I make all of that work, but I'm also a little bit worried time-wise with all of this. But let me know in the comments if you think that that's a good change, and if you think that I should maybe add just straight up a faction ship category or something like that as well. We'll see how it works out, but for this week we are going to remove Tech 1 ships. It's down at the bottom now, and we're going to take a look at advanced moon materials instead. But we must start with some plex and stuff, and that's going to be at 220. Like that, and let's get going. So here are the plex continuing at a decently low price. In fact, in the last couple of days still under pressure to go back below 2.9 million on the chart. You can see on the ticker that in GTA itself it's not moving so much. We've got 2,913,000 at this point for the sellers, but 2,824,000 for the buyers. That's actually a little bit of a dip right there. And if we go to the player owned trade hubs, that's where the culprits are. These sellers go down to less than 2.9 million, and then the buyers here, that's pretty much the same. So this is quite interesting. Plex continuing to be definitely below the average of the entire year, decently low at this point. Lots of sales have been happening to make this happen, but we'll see. Perhaps the war could incentivize some more plex dumping as well, as losses need to be replaced, perhaps by some people that don't have the ISK for it right away, and so they might just decide to buy quick plex, sell that on the market, and then replace their losses that way. So yeah, a little bit of pressure still, and at the moment you should definitely be able to grab some plex below 2.9 million, which I would say is a pretty decent price if you're looking for a place to step into some plex as an investment. 2.9 million, below 3 million, and you can pretty easily see that 3.4 million is definitely in the cards after some inflation. Next up, we have the multiple pilot training certificate. After a spike up on some pretty big volume to almost 1.2 billion, 1.25 billion even, we are now back down to a billion. So quite a bit of volatility here. That is usually the indication of more sales happening. Selling at just a bit over a billion, 1.058 billion, and the buyers coming in at a billion and below. So still very cheap here as well. Just not as cheap as the less than 900 million that we've had in April. That was the real opportunity. I think longer term we'll see that this will have been the bottom, the best opportunity to grab some of them, and then to wait, of course, because these are medium-term investments. I personally think that we will decently likely have an opportunity come winter. That is basically the horizon that I'm using for most of my trades at the moment. Next up, we have the skill extractor. That is basically flat at a low point as well, around 330 million ISK, 325 in fact for the sellers, 317 million for the buyers. Decently cheap as well, definitely below the year average, and again one of those that you could grab a couple, I think, if you're looking to make some profit on some trades for medium to long term. Next up, the skill injectors. Let's take a look at that. So the large skill injector, after dropping below 750 million, is basically staying there at the moment, selling for 754 million, buyers coming in at 736, obviously again below the entire year average, but this is quite a sharp drop off. It took Plex, you know, from February down to this point to go down like that, and then the skill injectors basically managed to stay at 800 million for quite a while, and then the bottom dropped out and we went below 750 million. Feels a bit more risky because of that volatility. That does make it look like something happened all of a sudden that caused this massive drop, and I'm personally still not sure why. I don't think anyone has been able to really put their finger on the reason why Plex, the Plex diminishing price hasn't at least gone from like 800 to 780 million or something like that over the February to June period. And instead it's really in June that we have this massive fall off all of a sudden. Is that due to a combination of sales, to the market psychology all of a sudden saying, yeah, you know what, with Plex doing what they're doing now, with the state of the game, well, we just need to go way down in our skill injectors, or that the market dried up. The volumes really doesn't show anything like that, though it's continuing to trade on average volumes here, so it's a bit of a mysterious drop to me still, and that means that it's either a really good opportunity, you can still grab them for less than 750 million, which is basically your investment point, and you can clearly see that 800 million and above is in the cards and is definitely possible for the large skill injectors, which would make it a pretty decent trade. But if this is something that is basically a change in the game that has gone under my radar completely, then they could be here to stay, of course, and that's the risk that you have to take. I feel like it's a lot less of a risk to grab some Plex below 2.3 million, 3 million, sorry, and wait for that trade. But alright, moving on to the small skill injector. There they are, also dropping, and in fact still at the close to the 1 year low point here, around 150 million ISK, 152 almost for the sellers, 146 for the buyers. So again, while most of the year they've been trading in 160 to 170 million ISK, you can now grab skill injectors, small skill injectors, for less than 150 million ISK. The daily alpha injector is back at a more normal level, around 55 million ISK. Used to trade at around 60, so that is still a little bit down, but that is quite normal. I think we're still seeing some pressure from all the CCP sales there, selling for 57 million ISK and the buyers at 52.5 ISK. It's also a very specific item, of course, that is tailored for the alpha clones. Might give us a bit of an indication on alpha clone activity. Next up, let us move on to our minerals at 8:30. Like that, and well, war is always good news. The first ones to usually take advantage of that would be Tritanium and Mexilon. So here is Tritanium after dipping below 5 ISK. The war drums were beating, but now we actually have a couple of fights, some keep stars deployed, some supers deployed as well in these fights, and there we go, well above 5 ISK once again. Awesome to see that. And if we go for Jita, 517 for the sellers, and look at that big difference here, only one order of 1.5 billion ISK, the rest is 300 million, something like that. It really does feel like we have some momentum to go even higher. There is just strong demand out there, and all of these orders that we saw last week, where we had several orders of I think it was like 3 billion or 2 billion units that were going for like 508, 510. All of those have been grabbed and are probably used at the moment for more production. In nullsec, buyers coming in at 504, they've also been forced to go up above 5 ISK. So if you have some Tritanium stocks and you do want to sell them, I think this is a great time to do so. Let's see if it has an impact on pyrite. And yes, this is something we've been, I think, waiting for a very long time. Pyrite has basically been going straight down for 11 months now. But on this war, something does seem to have changed. I think that there might just be so many people involved in the war at the moment that mining is dropping off across the board. There is enough destruction finally. That's been such a long time. It almost makes me want to take a look at the Tech 1 ships at this point. But we see that pyrite is trying to go for 4.5 ISK after staying below 4 ISK for more than a month at this point, selling for 455, and then the buyers coming in at 432, and we have to go to 474 for the over a billion unit amounts as well. So some people in the last 24 hours have been putting up their sell orders, expecting pyrite to go up towards 5 ISK, and then hoping that they can actually sell those for a way better price than they have for a very, very long time here. To see pyrite come back above 4.5 ISK is like 4 months out and has been declining for 11 months straight. I think that should mean some really good news for Mexilon, and that's the weird one. It is not doing so. It's actually staying at 70 ISK. I did not expect that. I would have thought that we would go for around 75 ISK at this point. So Mexilon is still selling for 70 ISK, bars at 66.9. Volume wise, nothing too crazy here. And that is quite a surprise to me. To see Tritanium and Zydrine break the mold, go back up here, but to see Mexilon stay below average, I would say between 70 and 75 euro on average price, actually close to 75, I would say that that's the average. And here we don't see that impact just yet. Volumes are down a bit, so it could be quite interesting to see what happens with Mexilon and to give us an indication of the possible longevity of this war. That would potentially mean higher mineral prices across the board. That is really if you have minerals, if you want to trade your minerals, or if you're mining, of course, then you do want to keep a focus or at least one eye on what's happening in the war. How long are these parties still going to go after each other, risking their big ships? That all of those are indications of trying to find a top for your sell orders. For Tritanium here, it's a great opportunity, but it might not be the best opportunity just yet. Isogen next, that one is continuing to not move at all, staying at the 1 year low point, so selling for 27.8 ISK and the buyers coming in at 26.8 ISK. Very, very low Isogen, and so no move here yet. So I must nuance this a little bit. It's apparently I think it's the bigger minerals, or the minerals needed in the biggest volumes, Tritanium and Pyrite, that have been the first to move. We're still waiting for Mexilon and Isogen. So next week, if we see lots of action, could be quite interesting. If we then also see Mexilon and Isogen actually move up a little bit, then we might be in for some good times for the mineral market. If the action ends, of course, then we might actually see a fast drop off, and then this would be your great sell opportunity for Tritanium. Basically, it all hinges on the war. Noxium, after reaching a 1 year low, probably an all-time low of around 250 ISK, is also bouncing back to 300, the previously well defended price point for Noxium. 305 for the sellers, 279 for the buyers. That is basically after the volatility in the last month, the market decides to come back a little bit in tandem with Tritanium. For the former Nulsic minerals, let's take a look at Zydrine, continuing quite low, heading towards soft landing at 500 ISK, 530 for the sellers, 511 for the buyers. So it's definitely not a move across the board just yet. And for Megasite, we also have quite a steady price just below 625, 622 for the sellers and 606 for the first buyer, 587 for the next one though. It's gonna be interesting to see what happens here, but to see Tritanium and Pyrite move up like that, especially Pyrite, possibly canaries in the coal mine, if the war manages to last quite a bit longer, if we still have some very nice fights, then we might actually see more and higher mineral prices, more increases in prices as well. If the war fizzles out, then we'll have the exact opposite. We might actually be back in bad straits pretty quickly. Next up, we have our PI market at 1430. Give myself a bit of time here and let's go. We'll start with the broadcast nodes. Ooh, that is nice. Have been waiting for that for a long time. Definitely need to make a trip to Jita at this point. Selling for 2.1 million, but million, but the buyers coming in at 1.95 million. So you're buying broadcast nodes for less than 2 million, which is below the entire chart. If buy opportunity in an advanced PI material. Very interesting, especially if you want to take that gamble for future structure still needing advanced PI materials here. A first breakout definitely below the average, actually a 1 year low point on the chart, and buyers below 2 million for the broadcast nodes. Very good news, a slight opportunity for you to grab some for sure. Construction blocks next, doing the same thing, heading for a 1 year low point as well of 11,000 ISK. Buyers are coming in at 10,700 ISK, 11,200 for the sellers. So the sellers, you know, it's still a bit of a margin. You're still selling well above 11,000 ISK, which is kind of okay, but the buyers well below 11k are where the opportunity lies at this point. Very interesting to see that drop off as well. Consumer electronics is still doing quite okay, climbing towards 14,000 ISK. So in fact selling for 17,200, buyers at 13,700. Great sell opportunity in consumer electronics at the moment, because 17k is around here on the chart. So man, that PI market can do some weird stuff. We have two obvious buy opportunities, and now we have an obvious sell opportunity as well in consumer electronics. The fuel related ones, let's see what those are doing. Here are coolants trying to get up towards 11,000 ISK. Not bad at all, 11,100 for the sellers, 10,200 for the buyers. Pretty wide margin, but both of these are still in good places. To see buyers of coolants above 10,000 ISK after this period here is pretty awesome. To see coolants selling for 11,000 ISK, which historically speaking is a normal price for coolants, is very good news as well. This is something that I personally like about PI myself, and going for fuel related PI materials, you tend to have that stability. Fuel is constantly used up, so you constantly use up coolants as well. That's something different from advanced PI materials. If CCP would at some point say, all right, we feel like we've done the structures, we're ready with that, we're going to completely focus on something else for the game. You know, advanced PI materials will see much less consumption, much less destruction, and you can expect lower prices. For coolants, you can expect less volatility, but more stable prices. And this is the exception now, because of course of the changes to moon mining that happened here November, December, I think, if I'm not mistaken. And it's great to see that one come back, because I've kept my gas planets. At some point I really thought maybe I should switch. I didn't do it, and I feel like it's a good choice, because I do feel like we'll have consistency from these PI materials at this point. So coolants back. Let's see what enriched uranium is doing. Still staying, I would say, a bit below average, but trying to stay above 11,000 ISK for sure. 11,500 for the sellers, 11,300 for the buyers. And then we've got, next up we've got integrity response drones. Also, look at that, dropping, chart below 2.5 million. Not as clear as with the broadcast nodes on the 1 year low point, but the pressure is there, of course. 2.5 million for the sellers, 2.37 million for the buyers. Still a bit too early, I would say. I'd prefer to try and grab some broadcast nodes over the integrity response drones, but looks like these are under pressure as well. Now we've got the mechanical parts. Also, look at that, going back for 11,000 ISK, not bad. 11,400 for the sellers, 10,300 for the buyers. Again, decently wide margin of around 1,000 ISK between these two. But back at historical values, buyers back above 10,000 ISK, and this is fuel related, so I'm hoping for more stability at this price range for the mechanical parts as well, which you're making on barren planets. Super common, very easy to do as well, and that gives you that more consistent stream of income than trying for the higher stuff, the riskier stuff. The nuclear reactors. I liked this one for trading, and now it is basically staying below 100,000 ISK for quite a while, but finally sellers going up. 97,000 ISK, we're slowly climbing up to the 100k mark here. 83,000 for the buyers. I actually have an investment of nuclear reactors myself, I think towards this low point here. Yeah, that's I think when I bought them, when we saw this over a week, and we're just basically waiting for some volatility to come back. Hopefully it'll happen this summer, but it is summertime, always risky to declare volatility on the upswing there. But you know, we're inching closer to 100,000 ISK, so your best buy opportunity is probably over for nuclear reactors. But you do see that sometimes we get volatile here, and then we do spike up quite high all of a sudden. The organic mortar applicators still staying a bit high for me. If you're looking for that investment opportunity, it's still okay actually. 1.15 million for the sellers, but 1,063,000 for the buyers is well below 1.1 million. So buyers are in the okay place. It's just I would love to see this drop off. Buyers below a million. That's when I would say, right, time to move to JITA as well and grab some of these. But that's not happening just yet. Robotics also slowly going up, back in the 100 to 110,000 ISK range, selling for 105, buyers at 99,000. Still a bit of a ways to go, but definitely back on the more historical price range of robotics. And if there's one specialized PI material that I feel is decently stable around that price, it would be robotics, because again, fuel related. Self-harmonizing power cores next, staying in the 2 to 2.2 million range. Nothing too special here. Would love to see a drop off. Where are the buyers? 2.1 million almost, so not as good as broadcast nodes, but definitely something to keep an eye on. Next up we have the superconductors, 12k, just below that, 12,000 for the sellers, 11,600 for the buyers. Around an average normal price, nothing too special there. Test cultures though, after that drop off, a little bit of a comeback. So we dropped off to 7,500 ISK. Yeah, investors came in, 8,400 for the sellers, 8,300 for the buyers. They basically said, you know, let's grab everything below that, wait for the next spike. But you had a very nice buy opportunity at 7,500, probably below that on the buy orders, and it didn't last long. Investors came in. And then we've got the wetware mainframe again, doing that third dip at this point to less than 2.25 million on the chart. Where are the buyers? That's 2,077,000 ISK, very close to 2 million ISK, which on the entire chart is very close to this point. So I like this one as well. Wetware mainframes has consistently been the bottleneck in production when new structures come out. So you can see here a spike up to 3.25 million. The very initial spike on the very first structures was even worse. I think it was really high all of a sudden. So this one, lots of potential there as well. Wetware mainframe, broadcast nodes, very interesting buy order territory. And then we are here for the changed advanced moon materials coming in at 2215. It's about the same number as the Tech 1 chips that I grabbed, so it could be interesting. And yeah, this is basically related to Tech 2 and different from before. The moon mining changed, of course. Before this was very passive. Now you do need to actively go mine for the base materials of this type of stuff. So could be quite interesting. Let's take a look here. Crystalline carbonite actually at a 1-year low point, heading for 150 ISK, 160 for the sellers, 160 for the first buyer though. So bouncing off of that low point basically, and currently trading for very cheap. Buy opportunity, well, it's gonna be a new category in EVTalk. I don't dare to give too much advice if I don't have enough background here, but to me this does look like something you could try to grab for around 160. Sell opportunities 200, 250, and even above that seem to be possible as well. So could be the right time. Next up we've got the fermionic condensates. Those are actually at a 1-year high point of around 110,000 ISK, 108 for the sellers, 103 for the buyers. I'd say this is a sell opportunity at this point. Fernite carbide, let's take a look at that. Slowly heading up in the last couple of days apparently towards 200 ISK, which is around average, I would say, if we look here. So selling for 200, buyers at 176. Not really pronounced, but very interesting. So we get a low point, a high point, and an average okay price, I think. Next up, we've got the ferrogel staying at a high point of around 50,000 ISK here, 55k for the sellers and 54.5k for the buyers. Zero margin at a high point. That is quite unusual. I'd still call it a sell opportunity though. We've got the Fullerites next, some volatility at a high point as well. So selling for 13,400. In fact, I think I still have some Fullerites that I bought yet in this period. So I think I really need to do a trip to JITA and look at some selling. Because yeah, Fullerites at a high point, and sometimes you can buy them for like 900 ISK. Currently they are selling for 1,300 ISK. Percentage wise, that's actually pretty impressive, but a good time to sell for Fullerites, I would say, although not the very best. 1,500 was pretty awesome, of course. Hypersynaptic fibers next. well above average and probably a high point as well, above 15,000 ISK. Selling for 16,000, sometimes buying for 10,000 seems to be possible. So here, yet another high point. Nano transistors, decently high, not the highest at 7k, but around 6,000 ISK. And if you look at the lowest prices, 4,000 ISK. So 6,000 for the sellers, 5,850 for the buyers as well. Again, that narrow margin, I feel like that does make it interesting. If more supply comes in for some reason and you actually drop the price, then I feel like these are very close to one another, which to me indicates that it's the sellers that dictate the price of this, which makes for, well, some very sharp moves from time to time. We can see that here, then that move up here. So yeah, definitely a potentially interesting market here. Non-linear metamaterials lower point seems to be 20,000 ISK, currently selling at 30,000 ISK. Not the highest point, but definitely a high point. And again, a look at that low margin here. That's quite surprising. So that does mean that it could be a very interesting market for investments, and crystalline carbonite seems very interesting to me then as well, if you're looking for that first investment at this point, considering what all the others are doing. Phenolitic composites, for instance, 1 year high point, currently selling for 3,500, nope, 4,200 ISK even. So that is an awesome opportunity, and this is a complete breakout because in fact we are widening our gap here, but incredible opportunity if you can sell some phenolic composites at the moment. And look at the buy orders, you can sometimes apparently grab them for less than 2,000 ISK. Photonic metamaterials dipping below 20,000 ISK. I would say that that would be around the average again, 20k, and 19,000 for the buyers, around an average price. Plasmionic metamaterials at a above average, not a high point just yet, but definitely above average. Currently selling for 23,000, buyers coming in at 21,000. What is the low end of the scale of the chart here? 15k. So yeah, definitely above average at the moment. Ceramic fibers also at a high point, around 600 ISK. And here again, 599 for the sellers, 559 for the buyers. Pretty narrow margin. And then terahertz metamaterials coming from a high point of 30,000 ISK, settling at 25,000. Quite a bit of volumes here all of a sudden. Are we talking big sell orders? Not really. In fact, 26,500. A limited amount of sell orders. I would probably say that this is very likely to be an above average price. Maybe I should also take a look at what happens with this. Yeah, not a lot. I'm quickly gonna go over these to see for trades outside of the station, but those are almost non-existent, so I think we can use the filter. And then let's move on to the terahertz metamaterials. 25,000, an above average trade price here. 26,500 for the sellers, 24,000 for the buyers. Above average, not the highest point, but definitely still above average. And then the titanium carbide, ooh, look at that. 1 year low point, selling for 172. 188 for the sellers, 168 for the buyers. You could potentially buy titanium carbide for 170 ISK. Another one that is actually at a 1 year low point here. Could be interesting. Now we've got tungsten carbide coming from a high point and is currently giving back some ground from 275 down to 225. So that's the advanced moon materials. First week, unless you guys see a real problem with that, I do think that we can keep this in the rotation. It definitely looks very interesting to try and get a good feel of what happens in nullsec, what could happen with Tech 2 ships, and it seems very like a very good trade material because it comes from another place. It comes from nullsec, and so you've got this very narrow margin between sellers and buyers, and so sometimes you have this very volatile periods here. So currently 172, but you see the high points at 350 in the right circumstances. So I'm kind of liking that. Very good suggestion. Thank you very much for it, and definitely let me know in the comments what you think about this change, which means that now we are moving on to Tech 2 ships at 29.15. Kept up in time as well compared to last week. So let's take a look at that. We know that many of these advanced move materials are actually at high points, and then it's a bit of a surprise to see the Aries drop down, but it's still staying above 30 million ISK, and I'm looking for prices well below that for buy opportunities. One thing to note though, buyers dropping down, to 27.5 million. if for some reason you can expect interceptor fleets to be lost in the war, this could actually be a good opportunity to buy some below 30 million ISK, but I feel like it's still quite risky. Next up, you have the Cerberus settling well above average, so, you know, I'm not really liking the trades in here. 304 for the sellers, 275 for the buyers. What's happening with the Claw? Actually bouncing off of the 30 million mark, currently selling 35 million. Gotta be the war. You can see that we are basically low in supply here. 36 million for the sellers, 30 million for the buyers. So was that a trade to make? I personally still think it's not a 100% short trade. This is basically the war that impacted the Claw market. Wasn't there a change to the ship as well that's announced? I'm not exactly sure anymore here, but I still feel like I want to wait for a below average price before I jump in on the Tech 2 ship market at this point. And it's just not materializing now with the volatility of the war. It's probably not going to materialize this time either. So that's why the Ares below 30 million on the buyers, you could take that gamble. It does feel very, very risky. We've got the Crow that's dropping down as well, now playing with 30 million on the chart, buyers at 27 million. Again, could be interesting. Is the Crow a missile one? Those I think tend to be, yeah, 4 launchers. Those I do think tend to be very interesting in fleet compositions in Nullsec as well. So you have that same opportunity as with the Ares. You can buy them for less than 30 million ISK. Is this the right time? Well, I prefer to see them below average, heading closer to 25 million, but perhaps this is the right time if the war you know, brings enough destruction. Crusader also trying to get below 30 million ISK here, buyers at 27.1 million. So it's the same pattern again, and that's really the gamble to take. We're finally seeing some Tech 2 frigates below 30 million ISK. With the war happening, is this the right time to make the jump? Next up here we've got the Heretic staying between 70 and 80 million ISK. It's not the high point, just like with the materials. It is well above average, I would say though. So that's not where I would trade. Here is the Hound, and again you do have that opportunity less than 30 million ISK, and on the war, that's bound to be on the war here, we're actually currently selling them for 36.5 million ISK, and we actually had a high point of more than 40 million ISK as well on the Stealth Bomber. So I personally prefer the Stealth Bombers, I think, over the interceptors, but I am seeing the potential opportunities here in some of the interceptors. So next up we've got the Ishtar, and I hope that that dog is going to stop barking, or that you guys don't hear too much of it. But yeah, out of my control. Ishtar going up from 250 million to 300 million ISK here. Not much to say. It's within the normal range, but it feels very risky to trade in the Ishtar actively. I was quite a bit surprised to read that there's actually Ishtar fleets roaming around in Nullsec as well in these big fights. Feels very expensive, but all right. Next up here we got the Manticore, you know, Stealth Bomber, trying to drop below 35 million ISK. So 33 for the sellers, 31 for the buyers. Maybe it's at the low. The buyers are at the lower end of the chart. It is a Stealth Bomber, perhaps. You know, as a war-related investment, you could risk it, but it feels even riskier than the Ares or the Crow, to be honest. Nemesis breaking through 30 million ISK barrier. That is starting to be a little bit more interesting. Buyers at 27.3, still a touch too high for my taste, but you are definitely grabbing Stealth Bombers for less than 30 million ISK, and potentially here 35-40 million is possible as well. So this is one of those that I personally might risk, because, well, it is a very cheap Stealth Bomber that does sometimes know some nice volatility. This would usually be, apparently the Hound is mostly in the meta, but if that one becomes too expensive, then they're gonna look for an alternative. All right, let's add Nemesis to the bomber fleets at this point. Then you might actually have an opportunity here. Pontifex staying very stable at the current trade range, slightly going up at the tail end here. So yeah, definitely too low in volumes to make some trades in. On the Purifier, dipped below 35 million and is back above that, selling for 36 at the moment. Yeah, bit of a margin here, opening up though, buyers at 31 million. And then the Raptor is also slowly dropping, trying to land at 30 million. I want to see it break through that. Buyers at 27.9. It's nice, it's an opportunity, maybe. There's quite a bit of volume present right here, but again, it does feel risky because we're not clearly below the average at this point. The Saber is actually at a high point, going up to 90 million ISK, so that's a great time to make and sell Sabers. Stiletto, very, very stable above 30 million. That's a big no for me. Even though the buyers are below 30 million, I need to see that drop off before I make that move. Then the Stork bouncing off the 75 million ISK mark, you know, more activity, a bit more buying, a bit more dying, and a bit more demand because of that. And then the Tarnis is below 30 million ISK, buyers are 26 million. It's actually probably the cheapest Tech 2 frigate at this point. It's also the one that is traded in the lowest volumes. So again, it's an interesting situation. Despite the war, we do see some drops in some of these frigates. Yeah, they are probably buy opportunities, but they still feel a touch too risky for me because you're massively dependent on the actual war to make a good amount of ISK of that. Although the Nemesis does feel like if you can buy them for 27.5 million, sell them for 35 million at the right time, something that can definitely be done. I think there are some trades here, but they're not that clearly visible. They're not, you know, I'd love to see the chart at 25 million and I would say, yeah, absolutely, let's grab some Nemesises. That's just not happening at this point. Moving on to the Tech 3 market at 36.15. Like that, and we'll move for the Confessor first. That bounced off of 30 million as we know, but we also saw more supply coming in last week, so we gotta be careful. Slight uptick in price, 33 million on average, 33 million for the sellers, 31 million for the buyers. 113 here remains dangerous, so I would say that they are still very, very cheap at the moment, well below average. Nothing all too crazy in the volumes, but that 75 here and that 113 here at 33 million is dangerous. If you see others have increased volumes, you know, that's oversupply specter still playing in my opinion. But yeah, 31 million, historically speaking, super cheap for a Confessor, of course. The Hecate, look at the volume increases and actually lower prices at this point, well below 40 million ISK. So we've got 38 for the sellers, 35 for the buyers. We do have 44.73, but nothing too crazy in the last 24 hours. So that is definitely something that play. Let's take a look at the last 24 hours, only 13 of these. So that is a sign of things slowing down, stabilizing at the current price range. It could also be a sign of the manufacturers of all of these ships understanding that if they would go all out at this point in the summer, they'd crash the prices to just crazy levels. But it might still happen if all of a sudden they want that liquid ISK, of course. So the Jackdaw, I think that the potential is there, is what I want to say. So the Jackdaw actually legging up to above 40 million ISK, 50 million for the sellers, 41 for the buyers. And at the low points here, we were selling them for 36-35 million. So that's a bit of more interest, I think. Jackdaws used in Nosek, I think by the Imperium quite often. And so these are selling well above average. In the last 24 hours, in response, we do have quite a bit of sell orders, but nothing too crazy in the volumes just yet. So this is still actually surprisingly stable. And then the Zwepel here staying at a price above 30 million ISK on average, 33.8 million, 30.8 million for the buyers. And we are still talking here to 41.20, but these orders are starting to be a bit older. In the last 24 hours, not that much. So I still think it's possible that oversupply could hit the market hard, but it looks like people know better than to pull the trigger on that. Next up, we've got the Legion, which is, so the cruisers next. We start with the Legion going down to 150 million ISK, 155 for the sellers, and that's 3 days ago. We've got 400 of them coming in all of a sudden. That is that potential that I personally still think exists across the board. It's a lower price. It's definitely a cheap price for the Legion comparable to the last couple of months here. And so as a result, we do see increased supply causing lower prices. Finally, it's been a long time. The Loki is staying at 250 million ISK though, with 50 here. Last 24 hours, half a page. So yeah, there's actually a bit coming in. Not nothing too crazy, but 50 for the Loki is probably a lot compared to, well, not that crazy actually, so it's still okay. 250 for the sellers, 240 for the buyers of the Loki. Still by far the most expensive Tech 3 cruiser. The Proteus is breaking through the 150 mark. This feels a lot more like potential regular market activity. We do have the 103 here that is basically stopping the price from going up too much, but then in the last 24 hours we get some more coming in here, bring the price back down a bit more. Then we've got the Tengu. That dog is still going. I hope it doesn't come through too much. The Tengu is selling for less than 150 million ISK as well. Volume wise though, that's bad. 600, 487, 141, 104. That's like 1,000 Tengus coming in at 155 million. That is for sure going to keep the price in check. And that is for me that indication that the fact that we're seeing so few confessors in the last 24 hours is not because they're not there. It's not because it's not possible. That potential is there, but people know not to dump stuff on these really low price ships at this point. So very interesting situation. Potentially with the war happening, the confessor could be a very good investment, because you know, if the Jackdaw becomes too expensive, what other fleet of tactical destroyers do you want to bring out? Probably a confessor fleet. That might be very interesting for the price, but again, you're dependent on the war, and that oversupply specter is still looming in my opinion. And then for the extra material this week at 41.15, we'll take a look at the faction battleships, often still flown in these fights, so we might actually see some movements there. So we've got battleships. This time we'll take faction battleships. Let's start with the Navy factions here. Here is the Apocalypse Navy issue coming from a high point, selling for 400 million ISK, 427 for the sellers. That's a respectable price for a battleship. Then 120 in the regular Tech 1s here. But yeah, around average, coming from a high point, maybe a touch above average. The Armageddon Navy issue, super flat here, selling for 475 million ISK. That's quite interesting, even like that. Again, not a very high point, maybe around average. Dominic's Navy issue, crashing, quite interesting, starting at 700 million ISK, crashing down to 500 million ISK. Buyers coming in at 446. I'd say potential investment here. This is quite sharp. You can see the potential, and you're buying them for 450, which is at around the low end of the entire chart. Is the Megatron crashing as well? Well, it's at a low point. The buyers are coming in at 353, which is well above, well below the entire chart. So yeah, perhaps you could have a buy opportunity if you want to make that investment. Raven Navy issue, definitely trading decently low, but not at the very low point here. 450 and 411. Scorpion Navy issue next, actually going up in price back towards an average price at the moment. So that's interesting. Both of these have a bit of a comeback in June. And that's for the Caldari ones. And then the Galente ones are actually dropping off this month. And then we've got the Minmatar ones. Here is the Tempest Fleet issue, stable at above 300 million ISK. A bit below average, and then the Typhoon is actually dropping off as well. Typhoon fleet issue dropping to less than 400 million ISK, buyers at 382. Perhaps this is quite volatile, quite sharp, but keep in mind that a year ago we were trading for 4 or 5 months in this current trade range as well. So, all right, the Navy faction ones, interesting. I like those, like the Dominic's Navy issue dropping off this quickly all of a sudden. But what's more interesting, I think, for the nullsec related ones could be stuff like this. And look at that, the Barghest going up from 800 million ISK, currently selling for 930 million ISK on increased volumes. I'd say that that is potentially due to what's happening in nullsec at the moment. Macariel, that's interesting, staying at a low point, selling for 455, buyers at 455 as well. You know, Macariel fleets used to be so ubiquitous. Now, not really seeing a big move despite all of that nullsec action on the Macariel. We've got the Nextor next, well, 400 million ISK, around a bit below average, so not a big move here. The Nightmare, I know that those are often flown, I think by test, and starting at 500 million ISK in the last couple of months are up to 650, 622 at the moment, but we're not seeing the war have an actual impact on this one. No big volume increases. We are of course at a high point, so perhaps they're not really deploying or replacing their Nightmare fleets at the moment because of the cost. The Balgorn, very stable, nothing crazy in the volumes. The Rattlesnake actually at a low point, coming from 550 million in a couple of months down to 450. Buyers are at 426. You can once again buy Rattlesnakes at a reasonable price. These are incredible battleships for PvE. Really awesome. And then the Vindicator, same thing, also at a low point. That's a bit unexpected. The only one that shows an actual move here is the Barghest in the Navy, in the faction battleships. But the others show some interesting patterns as well for perhaps long-term investments in some of these faction battleships. Some buy opportunities. Definitely, if you want to fly some of these, you can grab them at a very reasonable price. And that's going to be it for this EVE Talk, guys. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, I'll see you next time.